Hello, friends. Welcome to No Cap Room. My name is Jake Fischer, senior NBA reporter for Yahoo Sports. With me, as always, senior NBA writer for Yahoo Sports. It's my man. It's your man. It's everyone's man. It's Dan Devine. What is up, buddy?
Jake, I'm here to report that I don't think I'm Brat.
I saw that tweet this morning and I laughed from across the room. And the lady was like, "What's that? What are you laughing about?" And I said,
"And
Dan
you have to explain
tweeted
that Dan doesn't think he's Brat and why that." Yeah, it's not
great.
Knows,
she knows exactly what Brat is. So.
Of course she does, because she's a younger person who can categorize what these things are. And I learn about them late and then try to see if I fit into the round hole. But I'm really more of a square peg.
Why don't you think you're Brat?
Well, I didn't. It's not so much that I thought I was. I was on a walk this morning. I'm like, I don't want to listen to any more podcasts because I'm sick of stupid people like me talking to me inside my head while I'm walking. I'm going to put on some music. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, well, what's a new record I haven't listened to? And I listened to that, Charlie XCX. And I'm like,
nice.
People are talking about this. Let me see. And then I'm listening. I'm like, I don't think it's for me. And Jake, you're not here yet because you're still a young person, vibrant with lots of optimism and ideals. You get to a point where you sort of realize, it's not so much that I don't think this is good. It's like, I just have to be like, that's not for me, man. Like, it's not, I'm not the intended audience. I am not the person that she's thinking about when she's writing this music or when they're putting the production plan together. They're not thinking of this guy in this shirt with this haircut in this context. And then I kept listening to it and I was like, I don't think it's for me, but I can appreciate the way it's put together. And there's some bops on there. I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't think there's some bops on there.
I'm not going to lie. I was a little early on Charlie.
Of course you were.
What year was it? It was either 2021 or 2022. She was like the B headliner to the A headliner of Dua Lipa at a festival I was at. And she just blew me away. Just from like, actually, you know what? It was right before I started at Yahoo. It was like the weekend before, because I remember having all these ideas and optimism, as you had said, like, oh, I can write about anything now. I bring magazine writing back into the fold. I was like, I would love to see an NBA player do Charlie XCX's fitness routine, because the performance was just incredible. The acrobatics, while also screaming and singing in the top of your lungs. I said she was giving Egyptian princess back from the dead, here to remind you all that I am your badass queen energy. That was what I tagged her at before Brat came. So,
I mean, it's an impressive energy. It's an impressive point of comparison. It's one that sadly I've realized that I'm not going to reach here today, but that doesn't mean we can't give you the best version of what we got on this late August. Like, it's almost as late as it can possibly be August NBA podcast.
It's true. I mean, we're so off the rail. Should I give my quick Love Island NBC Peacock
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what the hell any of this is, so go for it.
All I'm going to say quickly, and we will get to 5 out. We have 5 important things to discuss.
There's 5. And it's
about
out.
The NBA. But I'll just say, in regards to the NBA's new television deal, I was very impressed by Peacock's effectiveness. The app, if I wanted to get to basketball at
during the Olympic presentation.
During the Olympics, it was fantastic. And, Love Island took pop culture by storm, just like Charlie's latest album. And so I watched the reunion with the lady on Monday night. And I will say it was pretty fascinating because, look, you're paying money for the service. You don't need commercials. The first time they cut to commercial, they just kind of like zoomed out, brought the theme song back in and brought back to the show. I was like, that's a little weird. Like, we don't need that. The next commercials were incredible. They would cut, and then they had, as you would want, as the NBA needs, they had these like candid behind the scenes of like the guys in the back dressing room talking about all the drama that just went down, akin to a microphone in a huddle, or, 2 guys going through the jersey back and forth.
If you could do me a favor and not talk into your shirt in front of your microphone on an audio medium, though, that would be tremendous for our listening audience.
It was effective. It was a tool. It was a device. But yeah, then there was one scene too where there was one critical fight from the season where they had, I don't even know, I didn't watch it live, but the premise was they had 4 of the women huddled up and they voted out one of the other women, and it was a big dramatic thing. Sure. So they released the tapes. They released the conversation behind the scenes, and it had a 6-box window of every angle, one on all four individually, plus like different shots that clearly, in the truck, they like have this optionality to whatever. Would be amazing to have that for like the final cut of the huddle of Game 7. And then like you have the reunion show of the NBA season in like August. You have your Luka and your Kyrie. You've got Tatum and Brown. You've got like one guy from the plucky 8 seed that's just there. And then you bring out this footage of what was happening in the huddle. I don't know. The ideas were buzzing. Peacock's got a lot of potential to bring this Love Island NBA universe together. That's all
I'm
I
just
have
going to
to
go
say.
out on a limb and say I don't think Peacock was the only thing that was buzzing. Should we move to 5 out now?
Let's move to 5 out. Steve Kerr reportedly won't continue as USA's basketball head coach, which we've expected, which we've discussed. We've also discussed that Eric Spoelstra or Tyronn Lue, who have been the assistants in this last iteration of Steve Kerr's tenure, are likely candidates to take over. Kerr also spoke at the Democratic National Convention this week, leading to rumors of a political career when he's done coaching. I have my limited knowledge of Steve Kerr. I would not expect him to continue to deal with the whims of public opinion when he's taking shots at Twitter coaches during his DNC speech. So I don't know if that'll be in his future, but congrats to Steve Kerr on a gold medal and even more American patriotism opportunities coming his way.
Yeah, what is he? I think 58 years old, and he still has some NBA coaching to do. I would recommend enjoying your retirement when you actually get to retirement age, Coach Kerr. I don't think you need. You've done a fair amount of winning in your life as a professional athlete and a coach. One thing I thought was if we're putting a button on his Team USA tenure, he started as an assistant in 2019. And it just feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, obviously the world has changed dramatically in the last 5 years, but to go through being sort of part of Pop's crew and then like the transition and the awkwardness of getting ready for that 2019 World Cup where the US got dusted and then losing an actual Olympic game in Tokyo in 2021. But Team USA or USA Basketball puts the exhibition games in somebody's record. So Steve Kerr gets to say he retires with a 21-3 record as the head coach of Team USA, even though 10 of that is exhibition or tune-up games before tournaments. I thought that was kind of nice. It's like, we're going to make sure you leave on a high note. We're going to say the best possible record we can give you and that you end with a gold medal. And then we're going to kind of put down over here the 4th place medal and, all the losses as an assistant
medal.
there.
There's no 4th place medal. That's what made it even worse.
You know what that is? That is, again, going back to how old I am, decrepit and dying. 4th place medal was the name of the Olympics blog when the Yahoo Sports blogs launched, which I wound up writing.
That's a good blog name. It's a good blog name.
4th place medal is a good blog name. We had a lot of good blog names. Ball don't lie. But yeah, Steve Kerr, walk off into the sunset, leave, get out while the getting's good, because whoever comes into LA in 2028 might have some different problems to try to solve with the way the world is rising up around the American Basketball Association.
I thought you were going to say the word of the world, other things, but neither here nor there. Zion Williamson is number 2 on our 5 out today because his apparent weight loss at an appearance at one of his basketball camps, which he made free for all attendees. Very nice of you, Zion. It drew a lot of attention on social media. Obviously, his fitness has been a storyline dating back to his recovery from knee surgery, when he was a rookie, and there was talk about Herculean efforts at dining tables and whatnot, and streamline that all the way to his lackluster performance in Vegas during the in-season tournament and him getting put on full blast by everyone for that type of commitment. So the fact that people will forget, he got in incredible shape at the stretch run of last season. He was incredible during the stretch run of last season. He was incredible during the play-in tournament game until he got hurt last season. So I don't think it's such a shock to see him respond like this, because the dude does seem pretty motivated to make this thing happen. Like, it will be pretty fun in this crowded, contending world of parity that Adam Silver has dreamed up and has made a reality, that we could get potentially 2 full seasons of healthy Zion Williamson and John Morant together. I don't want to jinx anything by saying it out loud, but hopefully we get it.
I have some stats and some thoughts and some numbers, but the thing that's the intrusive thought, maybe that's not the right term for it. The thought that is burrowing its way through my brain right now is an earnest question. My ignorance is showing. Is there a like platonic non-sexual term for a thirst trap? Like, is there a version of what you would call like a photo that's intended to say it again?
Humble brag?
Maybe something along those lines. Listeners, viewers, readers, reach out to us. You can reach me at Jake L. Fischer. This is a photo like this is intended to generate excitement, right? To generate like the widespread sharing of it. Where you're like
Twitter fodder.
Sure, there we go. These are some more ideas to get you amped up, to get you very excited. Stoke your excitement for what is to come next. Because if you're exactly right to point to the way Zion closed last season. And it's something that I talked about when I talked about the Pelicans with Shamit Dua on Divine Intervention last season. He had kind of like slow walked through the first, half of the season, maybe through the All-Star break, kind of where he was coming off that hamstring issue, and the hamstring notoriously tricky, and getting your conditioning right after an issue, an injury like that, pretty daunting. And then like All-Star break on, he really took off and got the ball in his hands more. It was something like around like 24 points, 6.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, usage rate up, assist rate up. Also like block and steal rates up, like the percentage where he was making impactful, explosive plays on the defensive end is like kind of a telling marker for how he's feeling and where his physicality's at. And so you look at that, you're absolutely right to point to the way he looked, where he was the best player on the floor in a play-in game that also featured LeBron James and Anthony Davis right up until he got hurt. And
yes,
so the cause for optimism there is like, if that's where he was by the end of last season, and then he's able to go through a healthy or, get healthy in the offseason, shed weight in the offseason, enter into training camp in like already in that condition, then maybe, this is again, the knock on wood, the cross your fingers, throw salt over your shoulder, whatever your particular superstition is. If you get like the guy who I thought was an all NBA caliber player in 2021, healthy with the added seasoning for the first time for an extended stretch, that's the reason for like major optimism about the Pelicans. The pessimism is who's their center, and we still have to figure that out. And like, what's the Brandon Ingram situation? Still have to figure all that out. But Zion at like the peak of his physical conditioning, coming off the way he played at the end of last season, that would be tremendous to get heading into a new season in New Orleans.
It would. Heading into a new season in San Antonio, the Spurs are going to continue playing some games in Austin, and Kevin Durant is going to return to Texas's campus to play against one Victor Wembanyama, which is cool for many reasons. Of course, he played there for one season. His ties to the program are very real. That's where he bonded with Royale Ivy, who head coach of South Sudan, ended up joining him in Brooklyn. That was purportedly a major reason why he considered San Antonio back in his free agency before he went to Golden State. So for him to come back and play against the Spurs on campus should be a cool moment, and one to set your league pass calendars for.
Yeah, that's in the whatever 30-something games I wound up writing about in our like games to circle on your calendar. I forgot this one. So my bad to my editors and to everybody who was counting on me. I let you down.
The people.
And yeah, I mean, why should the offseason be any different than the season where I fail you regularly on a weekly basis? Do you remember watching him at UT? Like, you're a lot younger than me. So were you?
Okay. Because I remember when Greg Oden started his freshman year, which was the same freshman year, he had broken his hand and he had to play lefty, which I also had a broken thumb and I had to play lefty. And I remember being like, I'm Greg Oden, and kind of hating Kevin Durant because I had a sixth grader allegiance to the guy who I was trying to pretend that I was having some commonality with. So yes, I watched a lot of I graduated high school in 2012. Every year of the millennium was the year that I was in school. So 12th grade. So
Right.
06, 07, sixth grade. I guess I was in seventh grade because it was the year ended. So
That's cool.
yeah, there you go.
Who was Jake Fisher's Kevin Durant though? So if you're the Odin in the situation, who was pushing you for 1-2?
In seventh grade, I made the A team of our middle school after not making the B team at all in sixth grade. So the Kevin Durant was the B team coach who didn't give me my opportunity.
Oh man. All right.
Yeah,
Well, he couldn't recognize greatness when it was staring him straight in the face. That was clearly
yeah,
on him.
yeah.
There's not, I mean, I don't know. The games will be fine. Kevin Durant was really, really good at Texas, in case anybody doesn't remember. He is one of 7 college players in Sports Reference's database. Goes back to 1947. He averaged better than 25 points, 10 rebounds, a block and a half, and a steal and a half per game for the full season. A list includes dudes like David Robinson at Navy, Shaq at LSU. KD was the only true freshman to do it. So he was kind of otherworldly as an 18-year-old at that point. First true freshman consensus national player of the year. UT retired his number in 2009. He's in their Hall of Honor. So yeah, this will be like a crowning, a homecoming hero kind of situation when he gets over there. And then all we need is the huge French dude to smack him around. That'll complete the circuit.
So when I got to college, was a hard traveling hero, to use Dan Devine's words, for WRBB 104.9 FM, the official flagship station of Northeastern men's basketball. And I used to love at the CAA tournament getting the media guides, and David Robinson at Navy, they were in the CAA at the time. He had every record possible.
Yeah.
What a hell of a career. Number 4, the NBA schedule is out, as we alluded to, with Kevin Durant's return to Austin. And according to Vivid Seats, the teams with the highest year-over-year increase in ticket prices are as follows: San Antonio, Memphis, Atlanta, Cleveland, and Portland. I just want to say, what in Portland is going to make a hard-traveling, hard-working hero want to pay more for the Trailblazers this year than last year? I don't know. I could see it with San Antonio. I could see it with Memphis. Atlanta, you can sell a dream of the number 1 pick, Zachary Shai, and Dyson Daniels after a strong Olympics, and the Trae Young, Eric could have a new life after the DeJounte pairing didn't work. Cleveland, you just re-up the whole crew. We're just as good as everyone in the East. I don't know what Portland did to... Is it cost of living increase? Is it, inflation? I don't know.
I think it really just might be like the fact that at the beginning of the season last year, you could apparently get the tickets for like $16 there. So they just cost, the inflationary increase is just like it costs more this year. But we might be sitting here and just disrespecting Donovan Clingan. Maybe that's what it is. And Denny Avdia, we're sitting here and we're not giving proper respect to the offseason moves that the Blazers made. Another full season of dominating. We're going to bring in, Shaden Sharp. The leap is definitely coming. All the blog boys are writing about it. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about, maybe even up to $18 worth of tickets.
There you go. Our last and final item of 5 Out is one that hits home very personally. Sharpshooter, 3-point contest champion Joe Harris retires from basketball, which my first thought was, okay, if you win one All-Star Weekend competition when you go out, that is just what goes on your basketball tombstone. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But how I will remember him was Billy Barron's first roommate at Virginia before Billy Barron transferred to Canisius and had the highest offensive rating in all of college basketball. And I called Joe Harris one day for a profile about Billy Barron for One Slam magazine. And it was a nice convo. And then he gets traded to or picked up by Brooklyn along the way. And he is just the sweetest, most thoughtful and considerate member of the Nets during the Kenny Atkinson lunch pail days. Anytime anyone had remote success and they wanted to ask Joe Harris to get a secondary quote about that other player, he was humble. He didn't have the ego to say, no, you don't want to ask about me. That's fine. I'll talk to you about that guy. Joe Harris is a people's people. He's a good man. I saw him one time at Lilia. Shout out Prime Williamsburg. And I just saw him in the wild, like another guy. I was like, hey, Joe. He was like, Jake, who you here with? Say, just like he was a normal guy. And after he signed like a $80 million contract, I wanted to pitch a story to him about what is it like for a normal guy to all of a sudden make 80 million. What do you do with that money? Would you hire a financial planner? Blah, blah, blah. And he wanted to do it until his financial advisor said, I don't want to give all of my advice to the public for free, which I respected, but I also respected Joe for wanting to be in on the story. So Joe Harris, I salute you. 3-point contest champion, great guy, hell of a beard. And when he wasn't healthy, a common theme around the Nets org during the end of the KD, James Harden, Kyrie days was, man, we really miss Joe. So was he the Jenga block that got pulled from the Big Three tower that let it all crash down? I'm not sure, but I know he was a foundational block of Brooklyn for many, many days, and you will be missed. Thank you, Joe Harris, for all you did for the borough. That's it.
I mean, maybe now he's going to run for borough president. Who knows? With such a stirring endorsement. But yeah, this is it's the kind of NBA story that's really neat, right? Like a guy who's a second round pick. He's lightly used in Cleveland, gets like churned out as they turn over the roster in LeBron's second year. Gets to Orlando, they don't have a place for him. He gets waived by Orlando, and it's like, all right, so is that it? Like, does this guy he didn't make much of a mark in the league? Is he gone? And then the fact that Brooklyn was just like in the desperate post Celtics trade, like, we don't have any picks. We need to like take shots on guys anywhere we can find them. Let's just get him in the door. And then he goes from that to a 10-year career, right? He goes from that to being one of, I have the number here because it was like a very specific number that I loved. There's 154 players in NBA history who've made 1,000 3-pointers, and he's one of them. Like a guy who was like, if a coin flips differently in 2016, he's out of the league, right? And instead, he gets his foot in the door and he just keeps opening it a little bit more every day. And I mean, obviously, Nets history, New Jersey / Brooklyn is not exactly auspicious. There's not a whole lot of stuff to recommend it, but he is the leading 3-point shooter in an NBA franchise's history. He's made more threes than anybody else in the history of the Nets franchise. That's pretty rad. Like,
it's pretty rad.
And so, there's also a great, our friend James Herbert at CBS wrote a great feature with him a couple of years ago called "The Net Who Remained," where the idea was sort of like he bridged those gaps, and like he was, as you said, the kind of foundational piece where you could rely on him to be somebody who created the space and helped space the offense and help sort of propel what you needed to do in terms of having a catch and shoot option, drawing attention away to create driving room, yada, yada, yada. And he just fit, whether it was the D'Angelo Russell version of the team or the Kevin Durant version of the team, the Kyrie, whatever, he fit and he made sense. Was like a top 10 3-point shooter for 4 or 5 years before that ankle injury and just never got all the way back, multiple surgeries and that kind of things went downhill from there in the 2021 season. But he stuck around, he made it, and made a career. Like, I wrote a feature a few years ago that was like what it takes to stick around in the NBA when you're not a star. And the kind of stuff you're talking about where it's like, a lot of it is just the kind of stuff that it takes to make yourself ingratiated in any workplace, which is, don't be a dick, be somebody who's easy to get along with, be somebody who's willing to do the extra helpful thing, those sort of soft interpersonal skills. And by all accounts, he was one of those guys who that plus being one of the elite shooters in the world was enough to carve out a 10-year career. So shouts out to him. If not for it being late August, we might not have spent this much time on you, but I'm glad we did.
I would have spent as much time on Joe Harris no matter when he retired. I really liked, I'd pop into
nothing not to like about him.
I'm saying I would pop into the Nets locker room sometimes just to be like, hey, what's up, Joe? We both had a shoulder. He missed a whole part of one season with a labrum issue. And I remember being like, man, Joe Harris has been out for so long. And then I tore my shoulder up lifting one day. And it took me way longer to get back. I remember one point in the rehab process, going up to him and being like, dude, I totally get it now. Why you've been dealing with this shit. And his face has changed. He was like, I know it sucks. He's just a normal dude. Shout out Joe. I hope to see you around Brooklyn sometime. Anyway, We are going to take a quick break. Thank you for dealing with all the shenanigans along the way of our 5-out segment here on No Cap Room. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to No Cap Room here on the Ball Don't Lie podcast. We are going to play a game that we have played before. It's called Who's This Guy? If you recall, we did it for Paolo Banchero, doing some NBA comps. We also did it for my rec league highlights, and Dan, I think, settled on handsome Josh McRoberts, if I remember correctly.
Whoa. Don't put out there in the internet that I said that Josh McRoberts. He's extraordinarily handsome. Listen, we can go back and see the tapes. I think it was me. Now you got me flustered because I'm going to get the McBob stands are going to be on my case. Anyway, the point is, we find comps.
We find comps. One more tangent. This is hilarious.
It's good. It's really good. We need some more tangents on this show.
I went to a buddy's engagement party on Sunday, unknowing that they were going to do, he's an NBA friend, unknowing that they were going to do a, quote, groomsman draft, where in front of friends and family, in very scripted, very organized ordeal, they drafted the groomsmen. And we got very personalized, nice jerseys that I'm assuming we'll wear on the bachelor party at some point. So I sent the picture. My sister sees it on Instagram. She goes, "What? Why number 6?" So I text the groom because I don't know why it's number 6. And the answer roundaboutly, first he just goes, "I did my research." And then I'm trying to think, the only publicly available basketball jersey number is the 90-second highlight reel that, not even 90, 30-second, that John Gennaro cut of my rec league championship. And what number did I wear that season? 6. So the number lives on.
Incredible.
The rec league stories live on. Today, we are going to play Who's This Guy? About one Guerschon Yabusele. Because in the early stages of the Olympics, as he looked, I dare say, fucking awesome, he was doing it against, the Olympic pool of competition, as we've discussed on this show, is not apples to oranges. You've got 40-year-old Rudy Hernandez playing certain minutes. You've got 18-year-old phenoms trying to, stake their claim. And certain countries don't have this certain firepower. Others, I didn't know, as I was impressed by Yabusele, I didn't know. I was curious, as I do. When I have a thought, I'm like, I like that guy. I text a couple people and I say, hey, how much better is this guy than this person? That's typically how it goes. And the question I was presenting to people in the beginning, the group stage, was Grant Williams. Similar size, similar big bottom, similar how good is the shot? What will that mean for this player's overall effectiveness on the court and therefore earning potential? And Grant, I thought, was an interesting case study, particularly because he was also drafted by Boston. He was not valued by Boston as much as Dallas. And then Dallas also did not value him that much and sent him immediately away at that trade deadline. So, and he also made Grant's roughly above the mid-level exception, 12.8. He's at 13-ish over 3 years. That has become such an inflection point on the NBA market of, are you worth the mid-level or are you not? So he was the benchmark. And I will say, in the beginning, a lot of people were like, Grant Williams is way better than that guy. And then by the gold medal game, it was like, a lot of people, again, NBA talent evaluators were saying, some were saying that they would take him over Grant Williams right now, which is pretty fascinating when you consider the fact that he signed for just $2.1 million vet minimum with Philly, which when I asked Sixers folks about it, I was on a lovely hike with the dog when the news broke. And the word was that, well, if you could just get him on the vet minimum, it's kind of too good of a deal to pass up on, which I agree. If you're comparing, if you think he's as good as Grant Williams, let alone better, if you think he's in the conversation, that's a mid-level amount of discount. Interestingly, I think part of, and I know I've been rambling here to set this all up, but we've got just a touch of background reporting here. I think from around the league, the fact that he had a $2.5 million buyout from Real Madrid was something that was basically a non-starter for a lot of teams, because that buyout is more than the $2.1 million salary he's going to be making. And this season, NBA teams are only eligible to pay $850,000 of an international buyout, which, if you want to get August podcast and loose lips on just two guys talking, there's been all kinds of rumors over the years about how teams just bridge that gap behind the scenes, a fancy dinner here, a private jet there. I am not under any circumstances suggesting that is what's happening here. However, I can report that because, look, on its face, Guerschon Yabusele would have to pay like $1.6 million of this $2.1 million salary from Philly to get out of Real Madrid. So he'd basically be playing for Philly for $500,000 this year and taking a massive discount to do so. I have been told that Guerschon's camp and Real Madrid are working together to figure out an equitable solution to make all that happen. So I don't think there's anything nefarious going down. I don't think there's any reason to be hurting or feeling sorry for Guerschon Yabusele's pocketbook here. But I also think it's just an awesome signing for Philly. I think it's a great signing for him as well, because if you're looking at a chance to get back in the league, what better than a place that is contending for the title ostensibly and clearly has one hole in its roster at the 4, where maybe he's taken his dunking on LeBron abilities and his improved 3-point stroke. Like, is there a world where he's in the closing lineup for Philly in certain games if everything in the Olympics translates? I don't think that's so crazy. So who is this guy, Dan?
Well, I don't think it is either, because you mentioned the issues at the 4 in Philly. Like, we've been talking about whether Paul George would play power forward since early in his Indiana career, and he doesn't really seem to like that idea. So you need somebody to sort of eat up the matchups there, and it's the likeliest outcome is that it's going to be Caleb Martin, because they were able to sort of snare him in from the Heat. He's been he's smaller 4 there. But Yabusele is like legit 6'8". What is he like? On a nice, nice kind day, maybe 240, 250. I don't know.
240.
But is the shape and size of sort of a traditional 4. And I went back and look. You're absolutely right. The swing skills.
He's listed at 271 this last season.
Which, I mean, I don't know. It's, I think the goal would be for that not to be true, for him to be in the closing lineup and maybe starting eventually at some point.
I'm curious what he was listed on France's roster for the Olympics. Let's see.
It's a good question. But the swing skills for him are, and it's similar to the Grant Williams comp. It's how mobile are you defensively? How versatile can you be on the defensive end? Not just using your size and bulk to anchor in the post, but also to guard switches on the perimeter, which is something he looked pretty damn good at for France in the Olympics. And then the 3-point shot. So over the course of 4+ seasons, so going back to 2020, all competitions in Europe. So when he was with Asvel in France's Pro A League, with Real Madrid, and then the EuroLeague competitions, together, a little over 200 games, a little over 600 or almost 700 3-point attempts from the shorter line. He shot 42%. So 700 attempts is a pretty reasonable sample, but from a shorter line. So if that translates to the NBA line, you're looking at a guy who on like a per 36 basis, it was something like 16 points, 6 boards, a little under 2 assists a game, and shot 40% from 3. The comps for guys of this size, roughly, on that list.
Which, by the way, France's official roster did not have waitlisted, maybe out of courtesy. I don't know.
Perhaps it would be ungentlemanly to do so.
Yeah.
So there's some past Sixers friends on there. George Niang.
Oh.
Mike Scott. Going back in the days, Rodney Rogers. And then there are some where I thought of, just because we like to try to make some jokes here, Saucy Nuggets, Paul Millsap.
Love it.
Where it's the older years, Paul Millsap in his mid-30s.
He was great in Denver.
maybe more value on the defensive end of his career at that point. But I think the other thing would be ball movement, right? Can you be somebody who can connect the floor? And that's not something we have seen a ton of from Yabusele. It kind of depends. But also, they were not playing with a ton of guard help for France, and he took on a much larger role in that offense. So if he can be a complementary ball mover, that would go a long way. Thick Warriors Otto Porter.
He turned that into a nice payday and never played a ball again.
That's right. But a guy who can help on the glass, can be that sort of knockdown shooter from the corners or elsewhere on the floor, guard multiple positions, and just sort of like hold down a spot. Late model Kevin Amor. Could he be a sort of Heat Kevin Love? Maybe. I don't know. The 3-point volume probably not there, but possibly. And then the other one, it's mostly a butt joke. Dump Truck Robinson. So Truck Robinson, there you go. 80s guy, but mostly it's about the dumper there. I think there's a real chance that, there's a real chance that Yabusele just he can't translate fully back to NBA.
It's perfectly possible. The scale is there. Closing 4, can't get off the bench, and both are very plausible.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right to point to the gap in utility where it's like, and the gap in price point. Grant Williams at the mid-level it was not as valuable as Grant Williams for significantly less than that in Boston, right? But in Boston, at a much lower price point, he was a main cog in playoff teams for multiple years of that run. The possibility of getting that kind of value this late in the postseason, or in the offseason rather, and with somebody who actually does have some real experience and is coming off of some of the best ball they've ever played, it's certainly a swing worth taking. And especially given that the discomfort in like, are we going to plug those minutes with Caleb Martin and like KJ Martin, and who's going to be the 4 for this? Like, there's a real hole to fill there. And Yabusele seems like somebody who could fill a hole.
He could fill a hole. I know online there was some fanfare about calling him Baguette Ben Wallace, which is good. But there's an obvious better one.
Okay, well, that one was so I was trying to do gameplay based ones. Baguette Ben Wallace was aesthetic. Well, I'm saying
if you're gonna use Ben Wallace, Ben Ye Wallace, come on, people. It's affiliated with New Orleans, but it's a French dish. Ben Ye Wallace was right there for the taking. Baguette Ben Wallace, he's not even skinnier. Ben Wallace is the baguette Guerschon Yabusele. But anyway, I think
Ben Wallace is the baguette Guerschon Yabusele. Ben Wallace, please don't come beat us up.
I just had a lovely 2-hour podcast with Rasheed Wallace back in Vegas, so we're on good terms. I hope that maybe Rasheed can be a conduit between me and Ben. But yeah, like 6'8", like you said. The top scale, I think, of like playmaker guys who could kind of shoot, because I think that was a big part of what made France's success turn in Olympic play, was the fact that the ball was put in Guerschon's hands with Isaiah Cordinier because of the guard play being not so magnifique as we have discussed here. So,
sorry, that surprised me. That caught me by legitimate surprise.
Thank you. So, like Julius Randle is like the fever dream best case scenario, I would say. I think the likelihood, to your point, he's going to be playing up at 4 in theory. Like, this is not your father's NBA where you're power forward 6'10" anymore. This is not Dan Devine's NBA. So, he's got the body of beef stew. I think the tangible role, can he play some small ball 5, play 4, depending on the lineup of like contending type teams the last couple of years. The guy that really comes to mind for me, Larry Nance. That's the type of like utility bench big who like can cosplay as a starter that I think Philly, if they can get that out of him, then Sixers fans, Sixers execs and coaches, they're going to be talking about this signing like they were talking about Kelly Oubre's minimum a year ago. And it's just a matter of seeing how it's all going to unfold.
Well, that That's the connective playmaking part, right? That's like the A skill that Larry Nance brings, that and being a switchable defender at the 5 to give you a different look there. If Yabusele can do that, that would be absolutely massive in Philly's multi-year, multi-generational at this point, the ongoing saga of trying to figure out what you do in the minutes where Joel Embiid's not on the floor. Having Andre Drummond as a like for like size option, and then Yabusele as a sort of a change up. That's pretty interesting. It's important to me to note that you said fever dream there. What I said was you were sort of like a fever dream, Josh McRoberts.
Yes,
and
we landed it.
Which the reason that I mentioned that was because that was also the comp I used for Paolo Banchero when I did this with Haberstroh about Blake. Who was this guy? Who could this guy be? And so basically, I guess what I'm saying is you're sort of the rec league Paolo Banchero in a lot of ways. The other thing I called you was fun size Kelly Olynyk. So I think there was I went back and did the research on it. I think some good comps there. I don't know if any of them are as good as Banye Wallace or Dump Truck Robinson, but we did the best we could.
We did the best we could. If you weren't expecting such a long diatribe on one Guerschon Yabusele on this show, stick around after this ad break for even more discussion of fringe offseason NBA moves that Dan and I like. And we're back for one final segment of this super riveting, super on task, super informative episode of No Cap Room here on the Ball Don't Lie podcast, where I just thought we would each pick one under the radar move of the offseason. Dan apparently came up with 17 that he thought were going to swing the NBA title.
Hold on. That's not what we said. And also, super producer John Gennaro, if he wants to get on mic for this, he can, said to me this morning, I put one in there that you had mentioned. If you want to come up with some more, go ahead. So give me homework. I'm going to do it.
You're going to do it. I will cede the mic here and let you pick one first, being that I just picked one guy and one team.
Well, let me ask you, does Tyus Jones count? Is that like too non-fringe?
I don't think he should count, but it's a valid point, being that he is making fringe money and therefore could be the most consequential player on a minimum salary in the league, aside from Guerschon Yabusele.
Aside from Banye Wallace. The reporting this week, it was SNY's Ian Begley, and I think maybe there was some news, some rumblings from other places as well, that Tyus Jones had more money out there. There was, Ian reported that the Knicks had a 2-year, $10 million offer out for Tyus Jones. There was apparently other teams that were involved there as well. And he turned that down to get a starting role. So this is the context of this is he's going to start for a playoff team on the minimum. And the goal of him starting there is to kick Devin Booker off ball, to kick Bradley Beal off ball, to organize that offense and systematize that offense in a way that, for all its talent and all the point producing potential that it had at times last year, it did not have. So you go get a guy who is like perennially the league leader in assist to turnover ratio. You get somebody like the steadiest set of hands in the business to be your starter for $3 million. I think that's a pretty strong win, especially late in the offseason. But I can understand it's been talked about enough that maybe it's not under the radar at this point.
Yeah, I think, this guaranteed starting on a playoff team is the thing for Tyus, being that that's been his plight ever since he was sent out of Memphis. It's that he doesn't want to be the best backup point guard in the league by all accounts. He wants to be a starting point guard. And the only chances he's had to do that have been when John Morant has been injured and for arguably the worst team in the entire NBA. So there clearly was not money available for him to do that aside from this opportunity. The Suns didn't have anyone. I mean, they could have given this role to Markelle Fultz, who is still unsigned and someone that I thought would have made a lot of sense from a defensive standpoint. Because as I've said here, I think Tyus is a super, incredibly efficient table setter, the assisted turnover ratio, God. But my big concern is him and Bradley Beal together in a backcourt in the playoffs, which is when his ultimate payday he's hoping to achieve based off this situation. It will come down to the last taste in talent evaluators' mouths, and that could be a postseason run where this team already almost, did they get swept? They got one game or swept?
They got swept. They
They
got
got swept.
4-0 to Minnesota.
So, and bad matchup, what have you. But I think offense was not this team's real issue in Phoenix. Of course, organizing things and whatever will pay dividends. But yeah, to me, I went defense on my choice as much as Gary Trent will provide much needed shooting on the wings in Milwaukee to space everything for Giannis, to give added space for Dame Lillard's high screen action. That Portland connection is obviously real and played a factor into Gary choosing Milwaukee on the minimum as someone who was in that ballpark of having the $15 million option, which Tyus apparently had at some point in time based off of my reporting. Him, Caleb Martin, we've talked about this. And to me, though, Gary Trent has like a role that he is A, qualified for, and B, has done in the past next to a key contributor on that team in Dame, where I remember back in the bubble when Yusuf Nurkic was looking like a top 5 NBA center. He was. He absolutely was. Gary Trent was picking up guys 94 feet, and he got a 4-year, $80-something million deal off of that two-way brilliance. And then he was sent to Toronto, if people recall, in the great Norm Powell trade sweepstakes of 2022, I want to say, whichever year it was, when Norm Powell was up for a big extension and all these teams wanted to trade for him. I mean, a dozen teams were in on it, ends up going to Portland. And the Blazers, the Raptors quickly rewarded Gary Trent with his own, massive deal to pay him plus 18 million, plus starter money. And to get that guy on a minimum in Malik Beasley's spot, which I remember telling you, Dan, my dispatch from Vegas, saying, I'm a little concerned that the Bucks' best perimeter defender is Malik Beasley.
Yeah. To
replace him with Gary Trent, who has not played consequential basketball in many years because that wasn't happening north of the border. I mean, I think it will take some time, and I'm not here stamping my reputation on the fact that I believe Gary Trent is going to be all of Milwaukee's answers in the Eastern Conference. But I think he's going to be, and Malik Beasley is a good player, but I think Gary Trent is going to be an incredible just improvement in terms of that role, that we have our top perimeter dog who we're going to throw and hound at anyone. He's going to be the guy picking up Tyrese Halliburton 94 feet if we make it back to the in-season tournament, not Malik Beasley. He's going to be the guy that we have to, go with Giannis at all these wings. I'm not saying he's the lockdown, best perimeter defender ever, but he's had all defense love in the past, and he is definitely better than Malik Beasley. That is the benchmark.
It's a fine benchmark, and I think Gary Trent Jr. is capable of clearing it. I think if you want to talk about Gary Trent Jr. as a lockdown defender, talk to some Raptors fans about the way he was playing.
What was he guarding for is my point, though. What was he defending for?
I don't know, pride in a contract, maybe those things. But the larger point is, yes, he is, if nothing else, he has been a capable havoc wreaker, like a guy who can generate deflections and steals. He did that effectively in Nick Nurse's system when they were cranking up the pressure. Off ball, on ball, if you're asking him to just hold up and stay in front, I don't know. It's a little bit boom or bust there. But you're right, for the price and for the, to find a way to replicate Beasley's shooting and give yourself a little bit, maybe more upside and athleticism at the point of attack, it's certainly, you can't argue with the price. So them getting him and DeLon Wright and Taurean Prince all on the minimum to flesh out that roster and the depth chart in Milwaukee, I think a nice bit of business for the Bucks. I'm a little skeptical that he's going to suddenly play up significantly on the defensive end, but he's got a chance to, and that maybe is all you can ask for. Speaking of playing up on the defensive end, here's another question I've got in terms of, does this even count? Does Quentin Grimes to Dallas count?
Yeah, I would say so, because when Dallas made it very clear that this was finally going to be the transaction cycle, that they were definitively moving Tim Hardaway Jr., yeah. I didn't expect them to get a basically third draft opportunity on a first-round pick who was a starter on a playoff team and, got cast aside in New York, and Detroit just gave him up willy-nilly. So how much value does Quentin Grimes really have. But the fact that he came back in a dump deal when Dallas obviously's biggest gap compared to Boston, but just in general after their finals run that they needed to fill was wing defenders who can actually hit a wide open jump shot. He should be a pretty massive addition, I would say.
Yeah, he's a year removed from shooting 39% from three on like 6 a game, playing off of Jalen Brunson. I think you give him the opportunity to play off of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. There's an opportunity there. And we talk about the difficulty that the Mavericks might have in transitioning from the lineup that kind of kicked them into overdrive last season, which featured Derrick Jones Jr. as a primary point of attack defender, bringing in Klay Thompson, who adds offensive juice and spacing, but has not been that level of defender. Grimes might not be either, but Grimes, one of the things that kind of helped transition the Knicks into a playoff team a couple of years ago was getting him in the starting lineup and getting him on the ball and letting him be that kind of hounding perimeter defender. There is a chance you just got kind of a plus two-way two guard that fits really well next to your primary creators for almost nothing. Like as a give back for getting off money you wanted to get off. So I think there's a chance that so much ink was spilled here and elsewhere on the Klay Thompson component of that deal and how Klay Thompson and even Najee Marshall fit in as like the replacements for Derrick Jones Jr. and how that would all work. There's a decent chance that Quentin Grimes winds up playing a much bigger role than I think we gave credit for at that time. So he's a name I thought of in that regard. Also, as a defensive thing, this one came up yesterday. Javonte Green getting the minimum with the Pelicans, 1 year minimum salary. That to me has the opportunity. I'm not saying I would, say that it's a guarantee. The opportunity to be this year's version of the Kelly Oubre signs in August for the minimum. Derrick Jones Jr. signs in August for the minimum. Like, where did they find? And then this guy winds up dramatically overplaying it. I'm not saying Javonte Green is going to start and play 30 minutes a game on a playoff team, but the Pelicans, as we just mentioned, did lose Najee Marshall, who was a rotation player for them and an important perimeter piece there. Javonte Green is like a chaos agent when he plays, and there's all the caveats of that, like 31-year-old journeyman. He played in Europe for a bunch of years before he came across, and he wound up, bit parts of seasons with Boston and then parts of 3 seasons with Chicago. But when he plays, the steal rate, the block rate, the rebound rate, the kind of names that come up when you filter in those searches, it's like Gerald Wallace, Josh Smith, Andrei Kirilenko on the high end of it, like really like spidery chaos wings that create steals and deflections and crash the offensive glass, run the floor like bats out of hell in transition. That's a kind of guy who could be really valuable and guarding multiple positions, like 6'5" with a 6'10" or 6'11" wingspan, can play like small ball power forward, can guard point of attack guys.
He started 45 games. On
a Bulls team that no one gave a crap about a couple of years ago. But yeah, like he's only played, I think, more than 1,500 minutes once in a season. And so like he might not make, he is a per minute, per possession projection guy. Like you got to look at it and say, could this translate in a larger sample? But again, for 1 year, $2 million at this point in the calendar, when you're like, we lost somebody important in Najee Marshall, our big, whatever we do transactionally in terms of like, how do we fill out the big questions? That's still got to be, what do we do with Brandon Ingram and what do we do at center? But do we insulate ourselves by maybe having somebody who can outperform a bottom basement contract? Javonte Green, I think, has an opportunity to do that in New Orleans.
Billy Donovan, I can confidently report, based off of various sources, was a huge Javonte Green fan.
Yeah,
and every
coach loves having a guy like this that's going to go 115 miles per hour and run through every wall you put in front of him. Like, he was a fan favorite in Chicago, in the same way that like a guy like Alex Caruso is, obviously not as high end, but these guys who are just constantly tilting at windmills and running as hard as they can into the problem to see if they can knock it over. Like, those guys inspire a great amount of love, and he could absolutely wind up being that kind of guy for the Pelicans.
There you go. All right. That is all we've got for you today here on No Cap Room. And that's going to be it for us for 2 weeks. We'll be back in September. We appreciate you guys all for following along through the dog days of summer. We appreciate super producer John Gennaro for doing all the things he does to make this show look and sound great. Please subscribe to Ball Don't Lie on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you're currently listening on, and leave us a 5-star review. And come back again next time, 2 weeks from now, for another episode of No Cap Room.